Hello, everybody. Good morning. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Today we have Lindsay Clayborne and Dean Delpeache, and they will be speaking to us about data-driven diversity. So a little bit about Lindsay. She is a certified human resources professional who is currently works as the people partner at Car Data. In her roles, she's helped leverage the vast amounts of data available to inform and shape their people and recruitment programs and practices. In her free time, you'll find her walking around with her adorable black lab Gibson and diving into her latest book club pick or watching Friends reruns with a glass of red wine. And if you guys joined us for this morning's kickoff, you'll know that Jeff mentioned Dean earlier. He is one of our returning speakers, with everyone else being first-time speakers. And Dean is the Director of Talent and Diversity at Fix Software. So welcome, Lindsay and Dean, and I will pass it over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Abby. Hi, everyone. Really excited to be here and talk to you today about data-driven diversity. I worked with Dean previously at Fix, where we worked together closely on a lot of data initiatives, specifically around diversity. And so we're excited to share some of the insights that we learned through that and what we're continuing to carry forward. So just to kind of give you a bit of an overview of what we'll be talking about today. Initially, the business case for diversity. So why is there an importance that we need to put on focusing on diversity and inclusion from a strategic perspective, and how does it impact the business? Then we'll talk a little bit about, okay, how do we actually use data to align and support our diversity and inclusion initiatives and strategy? And then we'll finish it off with what are some of the things that you can take away and do, and that we took away from our initial learnings, and we're able to apply them at Fix and beyond. So I'll hand it over first to Abby, actually, to do our first poll. We have a couple of them, and just want to start off with understanding from the group. Do you have established diversity, inclusion, belonging, and equity goals within your organization? Give it another few seconds. Awesome. Okay. Thanks, Abby. I think we can. So if we're looking at the responses, I think we can see about 33% said yes, 66% no. So want to start off by saying, no matter what, it's okay. Everyone has to start from somewhere. Just want to get a sense of what the strategic outlook is like right now within your organization, and hopefully you can walk away from this with having a better understanding of why it's important to actually have a strategy in place from a business perspective, and also what are some of the tools that you can leverage to develop and gather data and develop insights that will support those initiatives. So I'm going to hand it over to Dean to first talk about how at Fixed diversity, inclusion, belonging, equity are defined.
Hey, Lindsay, thank you so much, and it's so good to be on this in the session. And first of all, I just want to say, to Jeff and to the team, this is absolutely awesome. Love the being a part of Social HR Impact a second time. And then to my wonderful, wonderful, wonderful friend, Lindsay, who's just been a tremendous help in my life and support. I just so appreciate you. I want to turn on my camera, I promise you, but I can't right now because it's not allowing me to. So just think that I look the same. That's all that really matters in this moment. Now, when we think about diversity, inclusion, belonging, and equity at Fix, first of all, the word diversity, I think a lot of times we don't really understand what that word means, and I want to really help define it. It really means the unique characteristics that represent us all as individuals. A lot of times when we think about that word diversity, we a lot of times pit it as an us versus them. And I'm going to be very transparent because that's just who I am. Typically, the them is the straight, able-bodied white male. But the truth is that if we actually think about the word diversity, it actually means, you know, characteristics that all of us might have. So even that straight, able-bodied white male, when you even dig deeper into who they might be, they actually represent characteristics of diversity. And so all of us are actually diverse in different ways. Um, I'll give you an example. Let me tell you about myself. So if I was to talk to you about what we call intersectionalities, from a gender perspective, I'd be considered a straight male or straight man. From a sex perspective, I'd be considered male. From a religious perspective, a person of faith. From a disability perspective, believe it or not, I actually have a physical disability that you wouldn't be able to see, but I actually have it. And let's talk about from like a race perspective. I would identify as a black male, but from an ethnicity perspective, that's where it gets a little bit different because I was born in Toronto. My parents are of Caribbean descent, but my father, his actual heritage and family background is Portuguese. And that's where you actually get the name Delpeache. It's actually originally Delpeche, but when my dad moved to the UK, they changed it to English. So there's not many of us in the world. So all of that to say is that when you dig deeper into my background and really get to know me, you'll find that I'm extremely diverse and I represent many different intersectionalities. And that's how I look at everyone who is on this call today. So all of us actually represent unique characteristics. When we look at inclusion, we want people from all walks of life, all backgrounds to come into um, our workplaces. And what's really key is we want everybody to do their best work. We want everyone to perform to their best ability. But the best way to do that is to have everybody bring their whole self to work, including their identity, so that everyone can feel what we call supported and safe in the workplace. And that's where we get belonging. Belonging is not something we create. It's actually an intrinsic value that happens when we have an inclusive environment. And research tells us that when people feel a sense of belonging in the workplace, they're willing to promote their companies 167% more than people that don't feel that they belong. So your greatest strategy for recruitment is not hiring an agency. It's not trying to, go out and get community partners. That's all great. Your greatest strategy is belonging. Make sure people belong and they'll promote your organization. Now, the real conversation that we're really trying to really have, though, is equity, because we recognize that in Western society, there are some individuals that have what we call greater advantage, and there's some that may not. They're more what we call marginalized. And what we want in the workplace is everyone to have a fair opportunity in terms of career advancement, promotions, and even being hired. Let's go to the next slide, Lindsay. So with that said, though, I need to kind of stress this one point. We are hiring human beings, my friends. Now, I don't like using the term, oh, we've got to hire diverse candidates, because that's not really accurate, because all of us are actually diverse. No, what we are looking for is we're looking for people who come from different experiences and backgrounds and walks of life, different thought processes, right? But at the end of the day, there's no one inferior. We're just hiring human beings, but we want to make sure our processes are more equitable for those who have had disadvantages in the past of being hired. And so that's what we really, really understand. And that's where we kind of get that whole business case and the McKinsey study that, many people refer to in terms of the fact that, greater diversity in our organizations actually improves outcomes from a performance perspective. And so that's what I wanted to really start off with. And I'm going to hand it back to Lindsay to really give us a little bit more of a deep dive of how we have data and diversity really integrate together.
Awesome. Thanks, Dean. So before we dive into the next part, and we actually really dig into how, when I was at Fix with Dean, we were able to dig in and really build out a data strategy that aligned and supported the diversity strategy. I'm interested to know how many people are currently using any sort of data to evaluate their diversity initiatives. Give it another second. All right, Abby, I think we can probably close it, see what the results are. Okay, so it's about a 50-50 split between somewhat and no. So again, I kind of want to reiterate that, you know, even though, you know, you're using it a little bit, I think that's awesome. You know, everyone has to start somewhere. You know, we had to start somewhere at Fix. And so, and then even if you're not, I'm hoping that what we're going to talk about next will give you some ideas and maybe some tangible tools to actually go back to work today and think about, you know, how can we maybe start to use data to evaluate our diversity initiatives. So when Dean and I were originally working together, and you know, Dean's doing a ton of work around our diversity strategy at Fix, and we wanted to start understanding how we could actually pull data in, we needed to think about holistically the entire employee life cycle. And I think this is a really great framework to approach the concept of data and diversity, because it gives you a sense of you know, where can you start, whether it's initially to just get an understanding of what the makeup is of maybe your applicant pool, or your current employee base, or the people that are leaving, or if it's to start to evaluate, you know, how your diversity initiatives that you currently have in place are actually playing out. It's helpful to understand the different points of intervention and the different points of actually being able to maybe start putting in a mechanism to gather data. And so what I'm going to talk about next is going to kind of follow this, and we are going to talk about a way that we evaluated how some of our efforts at the attraction and recruitment stages were aligning with our diversity strategy. Also talking about, you know, when people are at Fix, what our actual employee base look like, and then, you know, how, again, like Dean said, that sense of belonging, which is such a key recruitment piece as well. And so how we actually were able to evaluate that. So 4 examples, again, how we did this. Number 1 is an equity statement. So we actually implemented, as a lot of organizations do, an equity statement within our job descriptions. Second was an applicant diversity survey. So being able to assess, okay, what is the actual makeup of our applicant pool on a variety of dimensions. Number 3, again, talking about once they've become a part of your organization, understanding the diversity of your current employee base on a self-identified basis. So again, not presuming or assuming anything along any of the dimensions, but actually encouraging people to self-identify. And then number 4, assessing how inclusive is our culture? How does it make people feel? What is their experience like once they're actually here? Do they feel like they can bring their whole selves to work? So dive a little bit deeper. So this is the equity statement that was on all of Fix's job descriptions. And what we actually decided to do was to implement a question, and this is a mandatory required question, just, you know, similar to questions, you know, talking about how many years of experience do you have, those sorts of things that you'll typically find on some job applications. This was just one of those questions. Simple question of, did our equity statement encourage you to apply? And the options were yes, somewhat, and no. And what was awesome is that 100% of applicants coming through our applicant tracking system had to answer this question. And that 50% of people actually said that yes, this equity statement did encourage them to apply to Fix. And what's awesome is that another 20% said that somewhat, the equity statement somewhat encouraged them to apply. So it played some sort of role in actually saying, yes, I want to work here, I want to apply to this job. So that's 70% of people that just by reading this statement saw that the commitment that Fix had to creating an equitable and diverse workplace, and that made them feel that this was a place that they wanted to work. So just with that one simple question, we were actually able to quantify the value that having this statement actually has to our recruitment process and to our talent attraction strategy. So again, very simple way to actually implement a data measure, and gave us some really great insight. So the second thing, so now moving not just from the talent attraction piece, but now into the actual application recruitment stage. So people have become a candidate. We were able to leverage a feature in the applicant tracking system that we were using, which was a diversity survey. So unlike the equity statement where everyone had to answer it in order to continue their application, this came after they submitted their application. They were prompted with this exact dialogue, and it gave them the option if they wanted to complete a diversity survey or not. Very short, only about 5-6 questions. And the data was actually stored in the applicant tracking system with no identifying information. There's no way to tell which applicant provided which responses. There was no way. And again, it was entirely voluntary. But it was asking questions of what gender do you identify with? Are you a member of a visible minority group? What is your age? So measuring those various dimensions of diversity, just to give us an understanding of what does our actual pipeline look like. So again, keep in mind, this is voluntary. People don't have to do this to apply. And what was amazing is that this is data from the first 4 months after we had after we implemented this applicant diversity survey. These are the response rates. So July to October, there was no response rate percentage between the applicants. So that was less than 88%. So on average, over those 4 months following the implementation of this survey, we had a response rate of 92%, which is crazy to me. I don't think we even expected, I think maybe we're expecting 50%. So to see that something about whether it's Fix or the way we worded our job description, or maybe it was our equity statement, we don't know exactly why the response rate was so high, but something encouraged people internally to actually to respond to this. And what was so cool is that every question had an option to, one, say prefer not to say or not answer. So like I said, there's about 5 questions on there measuring various dimensions of diversity. You could answer the question about your gender identity, but skip the age one. You could do that. What's amazing is that less than 5% of people were opting to put prefer not to say, or were not putting an answer at all. So not only did we have a high response rate, but we were also getting real data. Like we were able to actually see what the makeup of our application pool was. And there's a high volume too. We're talking hundreds, at one point even over 1,000 applications a month, depending on the number of job openings, and you're getting 92% response rate. It's quite insane, the volume of data that you're actually getting. So now we're moving, keeping in mind like the employee lifecycle framework, we're moving into the self-identification survey. So before, when Dean was working to develop our diversity and inclusion strategy and also our diversity and inclusion goals, we needed to get an understanding, a baseline of, what was our employee base made up of? How did people self-identify along various dimensions of diversity? So we implemented a self-identification survey. We leveraged our HRIS, which had very restricted access into one who was able to actually access that platform, who was able to actually access this data within the platform. So it was entirely reserved to, I think, 2 members on the HR team. And then any data that was extracted was kept confidential within the HR team, and any data that was shared outside, any identifying information was removed. So with that in mind, again, this was also voluntary. Again, it was also confidential. we had about an 85% response rate from employees, which again was great. Ideally, we would love 100%. We would love 100% of people to respond. 85% is great, but even if we had only gotten 50%, that is still valuable data. And one thing I want to kind of identify here is that if you're implementing any kind of data initiative and you're finding that you're not getting those high response rates, that can still be very telling. So for example, we were looking at the company, again, about 85% of people responding to the question of how they identify regarding gender. And we were able to then dig into, okay, of that 15% that isn't responding, isn't giving us an answer to this question, is that within a specific department? Is that within a certain employee level? So for example, if we dig in, of that 15% that aren't responding, we see that 60% are in research and development, and another approximately 30% are in sales. Well, that can lead to the question, why? Why is it that there are specific employees or majority of employees that aren't responding are in a specific department? So I can't say we dug into that, because we have used the 85%, the data we got from that to help shape our goals. But, over time, we could use a similar type of thing to dig in. Okay, why are people not deciding to respond? Or for example, if you were looking at something like promotion rates, maybe, across the company, your promotion rates between males and females are 50-50 split. But if you dig into that, is that even across all teams? So all this to say that, you can leverage the data, whether it's responses or non-responses, to help understand the story and the experience of your employees. And a lot of times it's going to lead to more questions. But again, you have to start somewhere, and using the data to develop those further questions is what you want to do. And then the last thing, we talked about sense of belonging and wanting to find a way to actually evaluate that. So the employee experience at Fix, we used an annual inclusion survey, again, voluntary, optional for people. And, we asked questions with quantifiable data. So on a scale of 1 to 5, how would you evaluate, I feel like I belong at Fix? Or my manager supports a collaborative team. So we got really great responses to these. So 91% of people agree that they feel like they belong at Fix, that their manager supports an inclusive and collaborative team, and that they feel that differences are not only valued, but also respected. So that's great quantifiable data. But especially with something like belonging, we need to understand a little bit more about the story and the experience. So we actually dug into and collected some qualitative data. So for example, how does your manager support an inclusive environment, and what could they do better? And so from that question, we found, 3 themes. One being, promoting more team building activities to get us understanding of different personality types or different working styles, understanding the different personality types, and also leading by example. So, for example, if you tend to have some more quiet people on the team, as a leader, bringing those people in, and taking that extra effort to actually recognize those diversity of maybe personality types and creating a space where they're all welcome. So that could then lead to, okay, how do we use this data to implement diversity initiatives that support this? So last question I'm going to ask would be, how would you rate your use of data to evaluate diversity initiatives within your business? Okay, Abby, I think we can close it now. Let's see the results. Beginner, intermediate, awesome. Okay, you know what? That is amazing, because again, like I said earlier, everyone has to start somewhere, and you can start really small, like we did with the equity statement, and then begin to kind of build. So even if you're at that beginner stage, that's Okay, and I'm just going to quickly go over, this is the Analytics Maturity Model by Deloitte, and it essentially looks at, okay, how are you, what level are you at based on the types of activities you're doing and type of data analyses that you're doing. Most organizations are at a level 1, very, very reactive, more operational reporting, which is fine. It's better to be doing something, and you have to start somewhere. When I was working with Dean at Fix, we started there. We just started with very basic things. And, over time, we were able to, probably over the course of a year, year and a half, we're able to move up where we had dashboards that we were updating on an ongoing basis. We were able to pull some of the historical data and actually build out a forecast model that took into consideration what types of hiring did we need to do in order to hit our diversity goals. So, again, starting small, being at that beginner stage is great. And there's lots of tools that you can use at that stage, and you can very quickly progress to a place where you're at that more advanced stage, and it can scale with you as you grow. But even if you're already at a big company, you can implement these things and help it grow with you. So I'm going to pass it back over to Dean just to kind of wrap us up here. I know we're coming up on time.
Thanks, Lindsay. That was fantastic. Hey, Abby, how much time do we have? 1 minute?
You know what? We started a couple minutes late, so you've got, call it 2 to 3 minutes.
All right, I'll do this in 2 to 3 minutes fast. So, Lindsay kind of gave you a snapshot of how we approached our data and diversity, and Lindsay was totally instrumental in that. When we think about the future of kind of what we're thinking about when it comes to data, I mean, here's some of the key areas that we're really looking at: compensation, how we analyze pay equity. For those who have done research in this area, we know there is a gender gap, and so we want to make sure that we are analyzing, people all across the board to ensure that we're paying fairly. We're looking at how we track our applicants. We're doing that now, and one of the key areas that all of you should be really considering is your job descriptions and making sure that they're inclusive, because we understand that when it comes to male applicants applying, if they see 60 to 70% of if they see 60 to 70% of the qualifications on their job descriptions, they'll typically apply, whereas women will typically apply when they see 90 to 100%. So these are some things that we really are looking into. How do we make our job descriptions more inclusive? Thinking about our candidate pools and ensuring that at the end of our final processes that we have at least two either gender specific individuals or racialized candidates in our processes to increase the chances of those individuals being hired. How we consider our hiring practices across the board to be equitable, and looking at our community partnerships with partnerships in whether it's racialized groups like Black professionals in tech, or groups around disability like Ableosity. We look at all those things. We look at data around promotions, transfers, who's being promoted, who's being transferred, and even exit information, right? Career development, how we self-identify, as Lindsay talked about. And we're looking at data around leadership. And so these are all different data points. We've got more, but I can't talk to you about them all. So these are all different data points that we look at when we talk about diversity and inclusion. Let's go to the next slide. But data is great, but everybody remember, we're dealing with human beings. We're dealing with human beings, and that's really, really the key. What we're trying to do is drive equity and fairness for every single person in our organizations, and that's really important. And the reason is, and let's go forward, is we want to change, right, our boardrooms from looking like this to looking like this, right? A place where everyone can thrive, a place where everyone can do their best work, a place where everyone feels like they belong. So with that said, we just want to say thank you so much. And if there's any questions, we'd love to take them.
Yes, so if you guys have any questions, you can put them in the Q&A section. If you would like to come up on stage, just raise your hand and I can bring you up to ask your question. To kick us off and get everybody's wheels turning for some questions, I'd love to ask, what comes first, the data or the strategy?
I can answer first. I think it kind of I guess it depends, which is often an HR response. But you know, sometimes there might already be sometimes there might already be some diversity initiatives in place. So then you want to use data then to maybe start evaluating, you know, maybe it was put in place and you know, the thought was, okay, we're going to do this because we want to promote more diversity. Okay, well, using data then to actually evaluate, is what you intended that initiative to do actually doing what you want? Or vice versa, like I talked about with our self-identification survey, wanting to get an understanding or kind of a baseline read to then build off the strategy from, and set specific goals. And then again, looping back to, okay, then we're going to use data to evaluate that strategy that was based on data.
Great.
Dean, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Hey, that's good. That's good enough.
Great. Well, we also have a question from Megan. So she's wondering, what platforms do you use to track this data? Do you use your HRIS or an external survey platform?
Yeah, go ahead, Lindsay.
Yeah. Okay. So, great question. So we used a variety of tools and leveraging basically our existing HR tech stack. So we were able to use our we were able to pull data from our HRIS, like I mentioned, and that's where we housed the raw data for our self-identification survey. You know, for the equity statement, the diversity survey, we were able to leverage the features and capabilities of the ATS that we were using. And then things like the inclusion survey, we were just able to leverage a Google form for that. I will say though that no matter what platform that you're using, just being really cognizant of how does that platform work, and does it collect automatically identifying information like names and emails? And then if you're exporting certain data, like for example from an HRIS, again, does it have identifying information? Okay, if it does, how are you storing that to ensure confidentiality and privacy? If you're sharing it, you know, do you need that identifying information? So again, it's just thinking through, you know, not only what you're using, but then how are you extracting it? And then to run our data analytics, we just leveraged Excel. And you know, we had started a little bit to get, you know, into SQL, but then we moved ATSs. So we backtracked to Google and Excel, but you know, even that's just a very powerful tool if you leverage it in the proper way.
Great. And we have another question from Rose about the surveys. So how did you design the surveys, in particular your self-identification survey, and how do you ensure that your data is current? So how frequently do you resurvey?
Dean, I'm going to hand that one to you.
Yeah, not a problem. So the way we designed our survey is actually based on research and to get the actual self-identification points that we wanted to track to do a demographic census. I think probably the best thing I'll say to you, Rose, or anyone else who's thinking about doing data collection, depending on how you're doing it, I do suggest talking to a third party, to be honest with you, who could really support that, because the way that you collect this data is actually extremely important, because it is you know, personal identifying data. And so you know, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I can push you in the way of an excellent organization that does this effectively. And then in terms of how frequently do we resurvey, in terms of self-identification, we encourage people. So we're not doing anonymous self-identification. There's a difference between anonymous and confidential. We do confidential, and that means that we actually encourage people to self-identify probably every month. They can go out and they go into their profile on their own and they self-identify, right? If we were doing an actual survey, an inclusion survey with demographic data, we do that every year. And that's mainly because we do many surveys, but we do that every single year. So that's kind of a little bit of snapshot. But again, Rose, you or anyone else that's interested in learning more about that, just feel free and reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Great. All right. Does anyone else have any questions? Or Lindsay or Dean, did you want to maybe comment on in the chat Megan's comment here about their survey platform being integrated with their HRIS and that causing hesitation with their employees? And maybe how to overcome that.
I didn't see that. Where's that?
Oh, it's in the chat. So so Megan was saying that their survey platform is integrated with their HRIS, and some employees are hesitant with the anonymity of the information shared. So do you guys have any tools or strategies for how to build trust with employees, how to ensure that they're feeling comfortable to share that information?
Yeah, so that's a bigger viewpoint. I'm not going to call it a problem. It's a bigger way of viewing things. So we're looking at organizational maturity at that point and where the organization is in terms of trust, etc. So my suggestion, Megan, is getting a third party to come in and do the survey, and having the survey go out to that third party. If the goal is to collect anonymous information, if the goal is to collect confidential information where you tell your employees that there'll be select people who have access to this information, you have to figure out a way to build trust. Again, probably a deeper conversation, and be glad to talk to you offline about this, but really it's about organizational maturity and communication. And so it might not be something you do tomorrow, it might be something you do in 6 months, but you plan towards doing it so that your employees feel confident and comfortable that the way the information is going to be used and housed will be confidential. And so that's my thoughts. Lindsay, any thoughts on that?
No, I think you nailed it. Yeah, and I was going to say, you hit the nail right on the head when you're talking about trust and that needing to kind of be the foundation before building out the strategy. So nothing to add there.
Okay, great. Well, we do need to wrap up. I did see here that Lynn had a comment about getting C-suite buy-in. So I do, just before we can maybe give some quick tips on that, I want to remind everyone that we're going to be breaking for lunch. I encourage you all to visit our sponsor booths, check out the networking in the lounge, and then attend one of our emerging HR tech demos. Those will be at 12:45. So any parting remarks for Dean and Lindsay, and if either one of you have any quick tips on C-suite buy-in as part of that, that would be great.
Yeah, I guess I'll start and do that. So the first thing is this, Lynn, C-suite buy-in is not a one-day event that happens on November the 10th and everybody buys in and we're all good to go. It actually takes a lot of time for buy-in. And my suggestion to you is present a couple of recommendations of changes that you want to make to really improve diversity, maybe one to three. And as you begin to work on those initiatives, collect data, then go back to your C-suite and say, hey, this is what's working. I think we need to do, some more things and add a couple of more things until they really get the picture of how important that this is, right? The truth is we're living in a day and age where a lot of CEOs are like, yeah, we need to do something. So my encouragement is to, start off small and let buy-in take its time. And I kid you not, last quick point, it took 3 years to get the Fix CEO to literally say these words: diversity is an imperative and it's a part of who we are, and we need to ensure that we're hiring in that way. It took 3 years. So don't feel discouraged. That's all I have to say.
All right, great. Well, thank you so much, Lindsay and Dean, and thank you everyone for joining us. I'll be ending the session now, which will move you guys all back to the lounge. So as I mentioned, check out our sponsor booths and some networking, and then we'll see you guys at 12:45 for some demos.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Abby.